Hello, everyone, and welcome to this brand new series, The Real Hustle Creatives Unplugged. We'll be exploring a little bit more about the challenges and opportunities that creative freelancers in Singapore may face. My name is Laura Key. I'm an actress, a host, and a voiceover artist. I'm also an advocate for media workers in Singapore. Now, today, for the very first episode, we have two guests with us. First of all, we have Jean C. She is a Labour nominated Member of Parliament, and she's a passionate advocate for freelancers' work rights and prospects as well. And of course, we have James Tan. Now, James Tan, he has been working in the stills and print imaging industry for 19 years in most roles, and he's also the president of VICPA. He's very passionate about championing for a more equitable cultural and creative industry in Singapore. Now, VICPA, what does VICPA mean?
VICPA stands for Visual Audio Creative Content Professionals Association. We are an association that takes care of the creative freelancers. Basically, if you are in the creative industry, there's a high chance that we will be able to represent you and speak on your behalf in terms of your business needs or career needs.
In today's day and age, a lot of people create content, right? We have TikTok, we have, Instagram and all these kind of platforms. So let's say, if you're working as a busker, you're working as a magician and you create content, could you also fall within this field of creative freelancers?
When we were looking at VICPA, we were thinking who is best served by this association, right? And because we talk about the core work that we do, which is representing interests, representing rights. And when we think about creating content, in the past, content used to be things that you watch on TV. But today we watch content in different forms. And in fact, media, content, entertainment, actually, the lines are being blurred. So therefore, if the busker creates content for the purpose of sales, right? So selling the content, growing an audience, I would consider the person as a content creator. But if the busker says, actually, my primary business is an orchard and I'm going to do busking, but somehow, somebody helps me to record the content and puts it up, well, then I would say, the person could be better served by another body that represents buskers. Yeah, so I think it really depends on where the person's work interest lies and which body would be best able to represent their interests in terms of dealing with service buyers, government agencies.
Yeah. But what about other industries? We have people in who work as freelancers, perhaps, creating content for like banking industries and financial industries, corporate industries as well. So all these, if they are working as freelancers, will also fall into this category, I suppose.
Yeah, because they are generally hired by these companies as the content creators, as kind of like a creative contractor. In that situation, we do not have the coverage and the protection of the Employment Act that employees have.
So what kind of challenges have you seen, like, either of you, as you talk to freelancers, what kind of challenges do you think they face while working in the creative industry?
The first one is always late payments. A lot of times, the client will delay, and the delay can go from 3 months to, I heard, sometimes a year or more, right? So a lot of freelancers don't know how to deal with this, especially the new entrants. They totally don't know how to deal with this. How are you going to approach the person or the company that is supposed to give you more job, right? If you piss them off, well, they won't give you any more jobs. So
Are there a lot of these kind of cases that you come across in terms of late payments?
yes, it is a major problem. The other challenge is when a freelancer first enter the market, they do not know how to price themselves. What is important is for a freelancer to know their own overheads, how much their business cost, how much does living in Singapore cost, and then decide whether doing this business, doing this freelancing is actually monetarily sustainable, logical. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, pricing and also, I guess, also the reality of practicality of living a life on this career. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think maybe just to put it in a nutshell, right? So freelancers are good at creating value. So you listen to your clients, you know exactly how to help them, whether it's it marketing, advertising, or just basically to communicate, and you're good at that. So you're able to create value. But ultimately, how then do you capture and retain that value? And so I think the important part of why VICPA came into play is because from the capture point of view, I think there were various frictions. So during COVID, that was something which happened, and many freelancers, either their contracts were actually prematurely terminated, they were not paid. There were quite a fair bit of business turnovers, and you didn't have any sense of income stability, right? So of course, from doing financial assistance and all that at a bigger NTUC level, but I think really helping businesses to rebuild and making sure that when a business starts to rebuild, they have the fundamentals in place, right? So I think that's where VICPA comes in. But again, even when we deal with other businesses, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to play fair and that a contract will be honored, right? So even if you have a contract, a written contract, oral contract, it doesn't mean that it will be honored. And therefore, then what recourse do you have? So that's also where we come in to provide options for people to exercise. Ultimately, the freelancer makes their decision because they are their own business. They decide the path to take. But I think when we talk to them, we share with them that, well, we have people like Laura, like James, who have also gone through that path. Why not hear from them? What options did they exercise and how it turned out? How could you tactfully deal with this situation and actually maybe set certain rules, and maybe the next time round that you deal with this client, things will be better. Right. Of course, ultimately, we also do tell them sometimes the best option is to walk away rather than choose to actually proceed, because if it's a red flag, you know that it's not wise to proceed, just walk away. And I think then that's where VICPA's responsibility is to open the networks of our members so that they have the choice to walk away. I think that's most important.
Another challenge that we can unearth is that creative freelancers are usually lone sheep or wolves, whatever we're going to call it, right? Lone wolves who are
Yep.
wandering around by
Yep.
themselves.
Yep.
I think it's very important as well to build that community around them. It's not only a community of support, but in case things like late payments or perhaps, they haven't been paid for, like people that I know haven't been paid. I haven't been paid for a job for 10 years. And back then, there's like no resources. Like you don't know where to go. Like you said, I want to go for legal help, but you don't know where to go for legal help. It's expensive and all that. So I think VICPA perhaps provides a kind of helpline, like, hey, I need help kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's actually one aspect we try to focus very early on in the formation of VICPA, which is accessible legal advice through the legal clinics.
That's right.
Right. Another one is, of course, contracts. Right. Me as a freelancer, I started out not knowing how to do contracts. It's okay when a job is simple enough, right? But when it becomes a little bit more complicated, foreground IP, background IP, you have to read GBIS, terms and conditions, right? You'll be swimming in a lot of legal jargon. That's why VICPA, we have also endeavored to try to streamline this process for all the creatives. I mean, beginners and veterans, because veteran myself, after 20 years, I still find contracts quite an obstacle to me doing my creative work smoothly, because I'm not cut off for that. I want to spend as little time.
You want to be creative,
Yes,
essentially,
I
right?
just want to be creative,
But
right? I just want to do
unfortunately,
my
some
thing.
of the
Right?
responsibilities as a creative is managing the business side
Exactly,
as well.
exactly. So we try as much as we can to try, to fill in that gap.
Yeah, but I think just to also add on, I guess when we come together as a community, then we also identify gaps, or maybe I would say market failures. Then the question is, what then do we do something about it? So coming together, we can actually put together a proposition. We can talk to stakeholders. We can talk to government, right? And find a better path for creators. So whether it's from contracts to IP or even to payment, settlements, the process, I think these are things which really we're starting from ground zero. Because Singapore is, although yes, it's a developed economy, but I think the state of freelancing is still really at a nascent stage. Business models are changing. There's platform work, not just for transport and all that, but even for creators. So what are we going to do about it? So I think that's really the challenge that VICPA has, and that's something that we want to work with the community to do something about.
I think a lot of creatives do not know is that if there's no contract, or there is a contract but it didn't specify who the copyright belongs to, by default it belongs to the hirer back then. So this is something that we worked with NTUC for 8 years. They actually did a thorough review of our Copyright Act, and 2 years ago, right? Yeah, they changed the Copyright Act to attribute copyright ownership to the creator by default. This is a gigantic victory for creatives in Singapore.
It's also about the how is the power imbalance, correct, between hirers and the creative freelancers. I think perhaps that's one of the challenges that we face also above all. Late payments, contracts, all these all fall under this challenge of, creative freelancers sometimes feel like we don't have enough power compared to those who hire us. So I think that's perhaps the heart of some of the issues.
Yeah, and also the norms. So I think some of the norms, like example, is it right to pay people late? And today we say, well, it's something that is an industry thing. Why is that an industry thing? I don't get it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
it's
in the
like-
employment law, you
it's
don't pay people late.
It's expected that you give 30 days credit, 45 days
So
credit,
these are
right?
things that I think we want to challenge the norms to say, is it right? Right. Why do we accept it? If we don't accept it, then do something about it.
So I'm interested to find out a little bit more about VICPA. How was the journey? What's the journey like to how VICPA was formed?
Yeah, so in fact, when when COVID happened, and we were talking to the different communities of creators, and it was so difficult to actually coordinate conversations. There were different communities,
Yeah.
but there were also different sector agencies, and everybody had their different streams of work. And it didn't make sense to try and use WhatsApp and try to piece together different threads and try to come up with certain policy recommendations when there wasn't any conversation and feedback between the different parties. So he said, well, actually Singapore's creative sector is significant. It contributes significant value to the economy. There are many people here who are very invested in their careers. I think it's time for us to do something about it. And I think that's really where we got started to say, what would be the fundamentals that we want to build? And we said, well, actually things like your contracts, your rights, these would be the basis of why VICPA is formed. Then who would be within it? Creative sector, but essentially people like your photographers, videographers who are really, I would say, the very traditional careers. But then you evolve production crew, you have people who are talents and all that. So that's actually how then VICPA grew. But as we grew, then that's where we got to know the different challenges. So I would say that the journey is still continuing because we're still discovering new things. And especially now with business transformation, you see quite a number of businesses evolving into entertainment, different types of formats of content, right? So I think VICPA's journey will still continue.
But if people already have an informal collective, then is there a need for them to join a bigger association?
Well, if they are self-organizing in that way already, VICPA does have a lot of other resources that they can tap on, right? Like as mentioned, we have legal support, we have contracting help, we even have access to insurances. In the cases where we can't buy it for you, we can point you into the correct direction, make the correct referrals for you to access them, because insurances like professional indemnity is something not one single person can buy alone, unless you are like, well, I don't know, net worth of 2 million or something.
Also, I guess this question is to Jean as well. I mean, VICPA, if we're talking about VICPA,
That's
VICPA,
right.
right?
That's right.
But VICPA is under a bigger entity
That's
as well,
right.
right? And that's where the power comes
Yeah.
from, I would say.
Yeah. So VICPA is an affiliated association of the NTUC, National Trades Union Congress, and therefore it's the labor center for Singapore. And that's actually where we then connect to policymakers, decision makers who can actually have quite a fair bit of influence in how we structure the industry and also provide safety nets. So, like for instance, when you talk about mediation, how do you have affordable mediation? Actually, these are policy matters. But if the issues and the concerns of mediation, like example, is so expensive, these are not raised, actually nobody knows. And if nobody knows, who's going to do something about it?
But on the other hand, I mean, I'm going to raise this, it's a little bit thorny, but I think most creative freelancers, I'm sure James will know, have a certain kind of apathy towards government-related kind of organizations and things like that.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So
When we first started to work together about 10 years ago, I was still a bit apprehensive, right? But after the copyright law was changed, then it gave me a little bit of faith that, hey, this might be the correct step after all, because my association, PPAS, has been around for 30 years. Barely anything has changed in 30 years. So that's my concern. And the first breakthrough we had was with NTUC. So I'm like, well, let's give it a bit more. Let's give it another shot, right?
I think this perhaps is a step in the right direction. It's just waiting to see what will happen.
Yes, when we're hearing all these voices from the ground, the more voices we hear, the more number there is, we can actually substantiate these problems into something that the authorities and the lawmakers can understand, right? If they look at us and say, these problems that you bring to me, how many people are there? I can't tell them we have 10 people that have these problems. They're like, oh,
No
no.
one's going to care anymore.
No, yeah, literally, statistically, we are insignificant. Okay, so in order to talk to lawmakers and get some changes done, power is in numbers. So we need as many voices as possible to join VICPA.
Can you share a little bit more about like what VICPA is working on in the moment?
So we are working on many things, but a few of them that I have on the top of my mind is an AI that can help you compile contracts.
So, with the AI, it's easier for us to help different groups of creators because somebody who is doing makeup will be having a very different context, different kinds of work terms, compared with maybe somebody who is a talent versus somebody who's a production crew. So, really helping them to walk through the process of coming up their contracts. And if they need to take reference from maybe other templates, then this is also a simple way to go about it. It's something that the person can use to say, well, if I had to build a contract with this term, what could the term look like? Right. And then you have a starting point to actually have a conversation with the hirer. So, it reminds me of the unlimited change clause. You can highlight the clause and you can tell everybody that this is a bad clause and you can say you got to change it. But ultimately, when it happens, you have to take responsibility and say, okay, I got to flag it up so that we can then take action and make sure that the norm is not to have such a
So
contract.
we can flag it up like to VICPA.
Yes, they should. They should. Yeah. And of course, now with the data from AI, we get a better sense of how often is this happening and in maybe which sectors and how do we then want to address it really from a advocacy perspective.
But I think a lot of the issue also comes from the companies, the hirers as well. Is there anything, that you might be working on?
Yeah, so of course, I think one of the big hirers is government. So there is a continual conversation with government. I think it's really about how do we work closely with government from the procurement angle and say, well, if you buy services, creative services, how do you value the service? How do we ensure that timeline, the way that it is being managed, it is fair to parties? I think that's also the intent of government as a buyer, right? It's not to actually give somebody a short end of the stick, but just that parties might not be able to appreciate the entire process. So that's something that we're working on. A separate piece is tripartite standard, because again, in Singapore, we don't have a law that truly protects the rights and the working terms of freelancers, but we have a tripartite standard, which is a baseline to say, actually, these are the fair terms of industry. And since this is something which the employers, the buyers, government, and also the labor, right, we have agreed upon. So this becomes like our national standards. So why not take reference to that and say, well, if you had to talk to a service hirer and you're not sure where to start, what would be that baseline? Use that standard. So we are also trying to ensure that service buyers are clear that this would be the baseline. Example, paying people on time.
You talk about the tripartite standard, right? And I think that's something that awareness-wise, when I talk to my peers, I think about 60% of them, or maybe 60+% of them don't know. So I'm 2 out of every 3 don't know about the tripartite standards and things like that. So is that something that you want to educate people about or bring awareness to, like, hey, you have these rights that you should be looking out for, I think.
Yeah. So in fact, when we talk about, say, example, contract builder, right? A contract builder, that's really to help freelancers to also appreciate that these are things that you should have in a contract. Because again, if you don't, then there are no safeguards. So I think we start from really the user mindset. And then after we understand the user's mindset and the hesitation, which is, oh, but what if the service buyer is not comfortable? Then I think that's where we then build in okay, then actually what should a service buyer be looking out for when they want to engage a responsible freelancer? Because you don't want to fly by night, right? But how do you then define then who is a responsible freelancer? So I think we're trying to actually set out.
It's tackling the problems from a lot of different
Yes,
angles, I think.
yes, really the perceptions. Actually, a lot of industries in Singapore are still very new to freelancers. So I think it's really about how do we really uplift that image and say, well, it's really not people like casual workers. These are professionals. They come in really to provide that service, that expertise. The right thing to do is to have proper standards, proper contracts. They are businesses too, so you need to be responsible to them. I think that's the kind of conversation. Right. So I would say I think it's a 3-year journey.
But on the other hand, I think it's also very important for creative freelancers to think of themselves as professionals.
That's right.
So we have to treat ourselves as professionals in terms of marketing, business, running our contracts and things like that. And really come to work as a professional, right?
right.
Being on time,
That's
delivering the services. Because if you don't deliver the services you're expected to deliver, then how can you expect to be paid a fair fee
That's
for
right.
those services? I think
That's
it's very
right.
important to look at all sides of it as well. Thank you so much to Jean and James for joining us for this episode. Now, if you do have any reactions to today's conversation, please feel free to comment below. And if you are a creative freelancer, you want to share your experiences in the industry, please also feel free to share your experiences. I'm pretty sure that James and VICPA are very ready to collect, compile, and convey your complaints to the powers that be. So thank you once again, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.